find those situations, find those early adopters. Most people fail because they get feedback on their product from non-early adopters. Chelsea, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing today, Dan?
I'm doing incredible. First off, I'd love to hear a few things. One, what is it you do? And more importantly, how did you get started in that?
So I am a co-founder with QRounds, which is a healthcare technology startup. We provide a virtual queue for patients and their families to know when the doctor will be by their room for rounds.
Cool. How did you get into that?
I was actually a freelance marketing consultant, and I was working with a startup team, and they asked me to join the team. There was just the two of them. Now it's just the three of us. We have a good kind of three-headed monster of skills that expands across everything that we need, and we've just been rocking and rolling for the last 2 years.
So 2 years ago, you joined the team with the other two founders. And like, where are you guys at in the business?
We're still pre-revenue, so they are professors with the local university. The QRound started as a university research project. So we're just starting to make the transition out of kind of the university research realm and into a standalone business.
Cool, got it. So pre-revenue, is there customers using the product? Where is it at kind of?
We've done some beta pilots, and now we're working on finishing up our MVP. We kind of had a fugly sort of working type piece of technology that we were piloting with 1 or 2 providers in a healthcare institution that's connected to the university. And now we've done some user testing, we've beautified it, we've redone the UX completely, and now we're building that out and preparing to pre-sell it to the institutions that we did pilots with and other institutions that we've had some inbound interest from.
Sweet, sounds fun. How can I help?
Well, we have been starting to raise money, and we know eventually we're going to have to be hiring an outside CEO. But one of our investors said that they would love to invest in us if we hire a CEO now. And my question is it really smart to be hiring a CEO with that investment money if we don't have revenue yet to support the salary ongoing? Or if it's not really a step we were looking to make now, but knowing that this investor would make a great partner and it would be great to have them on the cap table moving forward?
Well, I find just on the surface, the fact that the investor is kind of dictating activity in the business is concerning. So most investors in early stage companies like yourselves don't try to influence too much the early team structure, product roadmap, go to market. Like, they essentially believe in what you guys are doing and invest in that. If they believe that, then I would just be concerned as a founder that maybe they think if they bring in a CEO that, they're trying to see if you do that. So, I don't know. I'm always like, worst case scenario. Well, the worst case scenario is they bring in a new CEO, the founders are there, the CEO is friends with the investor, and then over time, they eventually kind of take control of the business and push the founders out. Okay. So that can happen. Oh, I always look at the downside and upside in decisions. So that would be one of them. And I don't think hiring a CEO is the right decision for pre-revenue business. I think you guys, the team, should be able to go sell and get customers and get to revenue and prove out the product in the market and make sure there's a fit there and build a demand gen process. And, CEOs, man, especially one that's like for hire, they're used to coming into a business with 25, 30, 50 employees. Like, coming into a team of 3, you're paying 6-figure salaries for somebody that's not very valuable in the early days, right? Like, I would just look to you and ask you, like, do you feel good about bringing on a CEO? It sounds like you don't, because that's why you're asking as a question. What do your co-founders think?
We're a little on the fence because we're looking to this investment group as kind of the experts. They've done this before. They've invested with other startups before. We're all pretty green at this, thinking that they may know something that we don't, but it did feel premature, and we haven't taken any effort on it or made any moves on it, because we just.
Do you have any other investment firms willing to invest?
Yeah. So we've been continuing to nurture those other relationships.
Yeah, like to me, my job is to create optionality, in capital. So like, it doesn't matter if it's friends and family, professional investors, high net worth individuals, investment groups, VCs, like my job is to find the best capital for the business. And if certain capital comes with constraints, terms, limitations, et cetera, as long as I have optionality, then I'm going to make the decision best for the business. So yeah, on the surface, without knowing specifically why they're asking for that, I've, invested in 40 plus more now. I can't remember the number, but almost 50 companies, and I've never made it contingent on a C. And I've co-invested with some of the best investors in the world, and I've never seen that part of the conversation. So it's not normal. I'm not saying this doesn't happen. I can see it happening, and I don't think I've ever heard it amongst companies I'm involved with, but not for early stage. Like it's just not normal. It's normal for like Series B and Series C potentially, but not for a 3-person team.
What's reassuring?
What do you like best about that, Chelsea? I'm just curious, what resonates most for you?
I think feeling like my instincts feel in line with what you're saying is reassuring. There's just all of this unknown out there, bringing this, especially out of a university and research kind of role, into a business. It's not just a traditional startup entrepreneur kind of run and gun situation. So just, I think really having that reassurance that our instincts were probably right on that.
Again, I don't have the full context, but like I would just ask them how many times they've done that and go talk to those companies and see if it worked out, right? Like as much as they're doing due diligence on you, you should do due diligence on them. And like I do this, anytime I've raised money, I always find out who they've invested in and it didn't work out. I don't want to talk to the person where they made the investors $1 billion. That's not interesting. I want to talk to the person where 7 years later they had to shut the company down, and how did the investor act at that point, right? Mm-hmm. That's going to tell me a lot about their character.
That's a great point. Awesome.
Cool.
Okay. My next one is, how do you really define what goes into the MVP and where to draw the line for a feature that everyone kind of is in love with, but can go in later?
There was a great graphic that I saw, and I used to have it like pinned on my Twitter account for a long time, which was like what the definition of an MVP, and it was using a car analogy. And it's saying it's not the tire, then the chassis, then the body, and eventually you have a car, right? And that's what a lot of founders do. The MVP is you start with a scooter, then you do a bike, then you do a motorbike, then you do a dune buggy, right? Like the MVP is designed to accomplish an outcome in its most simplistic, primitive form, right? So whatever the outcome you're selling, the promise you're making in the market, right? If it's to, I don't know, what's the promise you're making for your guys' product?
Time transparency for patients and their families of when the doctor is going to be by for rounds.
And that's it. So if the features help a patient know where they stand in a queue with doctors, that is it. So what is the 3 features that this thing has to do to deliver on that promise? It may not be beautiful on the back end. A lot of times I always focus on the front end to the consumer, not so much to the administrative side of things, but at least it does the job, right? And anything that would be like advanced scheduling or reporting features, or even like account creation or account management features, I leave that out. It's like, you can create an account. Can you change your password? Not day one, right? Like, we'll manually change it. Give us a call. Here's a number. Just call me. I'll go log in the back end. I'll change it for you. Like, that's the level of what's considered an MVP, right? You could spend with that idea, you could spend 3 years building a product that like is polished, even with 3 features, but you gotta, Reed Hastings from LinkedIn said it, if you don't launch your product embarrassed, then you waited too long.
Right. Okay.
What resonates with you on that front? Like, versus what you thought, or what did you like the most?
I think the simplicity of the scooter analogy really helps. I've never built a car, but I've had a scooter and then a motorcycle.
Yeah,
And
because
then
the
a
problem
car,
you're solving
so,
is how to get from point A to point B,
yeah.
right? You got to, most people, they fall in love with the technology, especially professors, okay? Trust me, I've invested in probably 4 or 5 research projects that we're trying to productize. And the team was so in love with their technology that they didn't even, it was like they dismissed certain market opportunities because it wouldn't allow them to do future product tweaks that was like part of why they wanted the company to exist. So it's like, do you want the company to exist to be successful and solve a problem, or do you want to exist to create a sandbox for you to do research, right? And I always say if it's cool but it doesn't make you money, keep it as a hobby. But businesses have to make money at some point, have to be profitable, have to be able to pay people's salaries, have to be able to grab market share. And I'm always weary when, people overbuild stuff, not because it's the right thing for the customer, but it's the right thing for them, right? So that's why I like the scooter analogy, because if the problem is trying to get something from point A to point B, I can get you there without building a car. It may not be appealing to everybody, but for this small percentage of early adopters, giddy up, let's go, right? Even the electric skateboard, right? Like super niche, super early adopter type product, but guess what? There's a big enough market for a company to make 25 million a year to build the infrastructure to eventually build something more capable, like maybe an electric, bike.
Right. What about features that maybe are outside of those core 3, but make it so your users can actually use it or want to use it? I think that's where it's that 4th feature that we're kind of struggling with, to where it technically, the beta, it accomplished it, but it was cumbersome to use, and we were having trouble with getting additional pilots for the usability and adoptability part of it.
I mean, anytime I get that the product can't be horrible, but the way I look at it is my responsibility as the CEO is to find a foothold in the market, a wedge that, based on what we've built, they're willing to use it. So, I mean, I guess when you started off, you define the MVP. If the MVP you define didn't actually solve a problem for a market, then you didn't do the MVP right? Like if you only did a one-wheeled scooter and it didn't work, put the second wheel on, or it's actually not useful, right? Like if it's like one wheel and it's dragging the back of it and it's like, yeah, I can move forward, but I'm like, I'm not getting anywhere. So, but that's different than saying, well, nobody wants a scooter. It's not true. Certain people will, certain situations, it makes a lot of sense. Find those situations, find those early adopters. Most people fail because they get feedback on their product from non-early adopters, right? So when you look at, I think it's Jeffrey Moore wrote a great book called The Innovator's Dilemma, and Crossing the Chasm. He's very clear when he specifies, like, this is what an innovator is, and this is what an early adopter is, and this is the chasm, and the early majority and the late majority and the laggards. Like, if you get feedback from anybody in those last 3 boxes, which is the majority of the market, 80%, then you could inadvertently make decisions based on tainted feedback, right? If I'm building innovation, for example, for the restaurant industry, and I live in a town of 100,000 people, and I go to my local restaurants and I say, hey, I built this new thing, this tablet, whatever. You can call it a point system, a loyalty program, an ordering program, a food cost analysis, whatever it is, it's advanced. And I'm asking people in a small town that are not category kings, early adopters, innovators in the restaurant space to give me feedback on my innovation, then it's totally stupid. Like it won't work, right? Like it won't make sense for me to have this business that's been around for 23 years that served the exact same menu. And the only reason they're successful is because they've got this aging population that allows them to go sideways every year. Some years are down, some years, but there's nothing about their business that's interesting, right? Nothing wrong with that. It's just they're a small business versus me saying, okay, I want the list of the top 100 most innovative restaurants in New York City. Okay. And those people I'm going to talk to and I'm going to get feedback on, because if they're innovators on the food side, on the menu side, on the layout of their store, like whatever defines their innovative company, then getting feedback about my restaurant innovation, that makes sense because they're innovators or early majority or early adopters, right? And that is probably like, that's a big killer of companies, is because I have a relationship and I go seek advice, I give it too much weight, and it's actually flawed in just the approach that I use to get the advice. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think more critically about who you're asking for advice and about the advice that's maybe offered as well.
I really think that if you just go to the mall with a clipboard and ask every person going by, you're wasting your time, because now you can do that if you qualify them, right? So they walk by, and for example, let's say I want advice about my property management app from a consumer point of view, from people that rent apartments. If one of my questions right off the bat is, do you rent or do you own? And I don't ask that, but I just say, hey, I built this app, what do you think? And I'm using that feedback, and they're like, oh, that's interesting. I don't think I'd ever do that. Well, do you rent or do you own? Well, we own a house. I've owned a house for 15 years. So you don't even rent. You don't even understand this market. But startups do this all the time. Like, I see it all the time. They never qualify the people they're asking feedback from. And when you're making decisions that could impact a developer to go down a path for 20 hours, 40 hours, 60 hours, 2 engineers to build a feature that might take them 3 weeks, right? We're talking, what is that, 120, 240 hours at the developer rates that we pay people? Like, those are some really big financial decisions made with tainted feedback. And that I think is the art component of building a company. Like, do you have that sensibility? Do you understand how to qualify people out of like what feedback's helpful versus hurtful, right?
Yeah, that's a perfect segue to my next question, is talking about hiring developers. And right now we've got a technical co-founder who, with a grad student, has built everything thus far. And we're working with an agency on the UX side to help us with the testing and the front-end development part. At what point does it make the most sense to bring on the front-end development in-house versus sticking with an agency relationship?
Yeah, the challenge with companies, and one of the reasons a lot of accelerators like co-founders, one technical at least, or at least both technical, is because companies only ever kind of die when they run out of resources. Okay, it doesn't matter if it's money, people, time. Like, they just essentially, if you can live long enough to iterate and learn, at some point, as long as there's a problem to be solved in the market, you'll figure something out. And if the way you learn requires you to spend money, right? Like paying a development agency to spend money, then there's only so many shots on goal until you run out of money. And it becomes dangerous. Whereas if you bring somebody in-house and you're going, you could always like defer salaries, right? And queue that up and trade it with stock options. And, obviously if you're paying for an agency, you're paying a premium, usually at least 40% more than market, if not more, because they got to make their margins. So like, to me, I don't like having, in the early days, having the engineering being done by a third party. If I can avoid it, maybe because there's something that needs to get built in the short term, we just pay an agency since they have somebody available. But in parallel, I'm going to backfill it with a part-time or full-time dedicated hire that I can negotiate with, that eventually I can bring on full-time. So just in general, I don't like dev teams involved in early stage startups, because it makes it really tough for you to control spend. And the other thing is, they're just going to build whatever you tell them to build, and their incentives are not aligned, meaning that they're going to make more money the more stuff they convince you to build. You're going to lose money the more stuff you build that doesn't actually solve a problem or isn't as invaluable to your customer. And the measure twice, cut once analogy really matters in software. It's why I'm a big fan of clickable prototypes, reverse engineering, from the customer, showing them the prototypes, getting them to give feedback. Like, by the time I'm spending money and time and resources on coding, I want to make sure that it's pretty pretty guaranteed that what we're about to build is valued by the market. And that's pre-sales, that's early adopter programs, that's, you know, getting paid to go build the thing. People are like, oh, nobody's going to pay me to build this. Every day there's this thing called consulting and custom development that's happening amongst companies across North America and the world. And people will pay for custom development. So if they're paying for custom development and you have an opportunity to build a software to solve a problem, they will pay you to be part of an early adopter program to get first access to a tool that you guys are building, as long as you show them what they're paying for through some kind of interface, through some kind of, you know, one pager that explains the product and how it's going to solve the problem. And then they're going to ask you questions like, does it have this feature? It's like, no, in the first release, it will not. Here's our roadmap. And as long as they're okay with that and it's aligned, that's great. But yeah, long-winded answer to the question if you should have in-house versus out-house. Again, if it's short-term, just like a quick project, I don't mind it, but I do want my development team in-house.
Okay, it's more of a contract to hire freelancer.
Always. Yeah, to me, it's like, I want to build my team. The team is what's going to keep you going long-term. So I shared a lot of stuff with you, Chelsea. I'm just curious, based on things you've seen me share online, you know, you've been following me for a while, what is the most impactful thing I've ever shared with you that you like, you know, that you've shared with other people or resonated the most with you, either this conversation or even previously? I'm just curious, what's been the most important
definitely
thing?
all of the content that you have on pre-selling the MVP to fund development. That's something that I'm starting the conversation with my co-founders about, and building out sales process. Be like, this is going to be a better way than raising capital and selling part of the company. And we're just trying to make that kind of, I think it's an emotional shift for them to think of it that way. And that's been probably the most valuable out of all the content.
Customer financing. It's my favorite thing. Get the customers to pay you to build the product and keep control of the business as much as you can, and keep as much of the business as you can. And it just helps you avoid making a lot of mistakes. So I love that that's your answer, Chelsea. I appreciate the time. Keep me posted on your progress, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
Thanks for your time today.
All right. Have an amazing day. Cheers.
Cheers.